welcome everybody on this really nice Friday evening. We thought this would be a good way to end the week, is to talk about light. It's heading towards spring, and the Illuminated River Foundation is heading towards the next phase of its illumination, and Leo is our artist who is creating light art on 5 more of the bridges of central London. So bringing light art to London is the title of this talk, and I'm so glad that we've also got Teemu Määttänen joining us all the way from Finland, who of course has a piece of work also in London on the Southbank as part of their Winter Lights Festival, which has been extended until the 28th of March. So if you haven't had a chance to see it yet and you're in London and it's safe for you to do so under current restrictions, etc., please do go and have a look, and also have a look at our first 4 bridges, which are London Bridge, Cannon Street, Southwark Bridge and Millennium Bridge. And I think light has played such an important part in our dealing with the dark times of COVID, and particularly maybe the last lockdown, which has felt sort of, certainly in England, our 3rd one has been proving quite hard work for, I think, everybody really. I've got a few housekeeping and notes here. I mean, obviously we, Illuminated River Foundation, have been working with the Finnish Institute in the UK and Ireland to collaborate on this talk, which has been great to do, and I hope the first of many such collaborations. The reason why we thought that Leo and Teemu might make an interesting dialogue is that they both use coding and LED to paint with light, to use computer program as a tool as to compose and develop their public art commissions in a way that I think, you know, has some resonance with the way that light and public art is so important in our city, and has been developing in many festivals. And Teemu, you must be missing some of those festivals that you exhibit at, because it feels like those sort of things are sort of a long way away in terms of coming back. So I think this discussion is really about what light art can do to bring beauty, joy, a bit of magic and some tranquility, as well as sort of working with the urban environment. But what can light do? What can art do as well? And art will always find a way. I think it's a bit like nature, and what we've been doing at Illuminated River is carrying on despite the many challenges that are thrown at us. And maybe it's also the fact that Leo works in this way, in the way that he does, has enabled us to deliver the next phase remotely, which we were hoping Leo would be joining us, and we would actually be having this talk, or when it was first planned, was going to be in the flesh, but we're going to have to work remotely. So that's a shame, but we will get there, won't we, Leo? And I'm very grateful for Johanna Agerman-Ross to join us, because Johanna is the curator of 20th century and contemporary furniture at the wonderful Victoria and Albert Museum. She is also the founder of Disegno and used to be the editor of Icon magazine. So thank you very much for moderating this talk for us. So very quickly, what's going to happen is both of our fantastic artists are going to give a 10-minute presentation. And then Johanna will facilitate a conversation. And then we will open it up for a Q&A, so 15-minute Q&A session. So if you've got any questions, then just please send them through the Zoom chat. We'll try and answer as many as we can, but as I said at the beginning, we've got nearly 500 people joining this talk, so please don't be upset if we don't get to answer your particular question. The event is being recorded, which is great, and it will be uploaded onto the Illuminated River website. So if you have to dash off, if some children are asking to be fed at any point during this talk, then we totally understand, and you can rejoin and watch the talk anytime that you like from tomorrow onwards. So really, I would just like to welcome you all. Thank you very much for coming, and hope that you've got a drink handy, and hand over to Leo to start his presentation. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. I'll just do I'm going to get my screen share going here. and I'll talk briefly about some of my work and how that got started. I started out as a sculptor way back when, and I was, very interested in creating installation spaces. And then I got into technology in the early 90s. So it took me a while to find my medium, which is light sculpture. And I was very inspired by artists like James Turrell and Dan Flavin, but I wanted to add computation to the mix. So sequencing, so computer programs that are all custom made that we've been working on for over 20 years are used to sequence arrays of LEDs. So I started out as having, gallery exhibitions, and then slowly grew into public art, which has been really thrilling to be able to work with buildings and architecture, and to activate spaces. This is a piece here in the Bleecker Street subway station in Manhattan, called Hive. So it kind of enlivens the station. It's the first piece of digital art that the Metropolitan Transportation Authority has acquired. So that's exciting to be able to put this work into these transportation systems. Here's another work called Buckyball, which we presented in Madison Square Park. And this is a truncated icosahedron and nested in another form. And I was interested in not just the spatial geometry of it, but the temporal. So moving light across that form, and kind of revealing it through that movement. And then having two forms which are mirroring one another kind of creates this interconnection as light moves between the two. So it was, it's been exciting to present this here, and we've done several Buckyballs that have moved around the country. Some of my pieces are, monochromatic, and others are using color. This is a piece called Cylinder, which is a gallery piece that was actually shown at the Hayward Gallery in the Light Show, which was a wonderful exhibition, and was really my kind of very exciting to be in London and to be able to show this work there. One of the major pieces I've done is the Bay Lights in San Francisco. I was asked to think about the Bay Bridge as a canvas and what could I do. So my work is all about programming and sequencing. So here's my, here I am with my ThinkPad sitting in front of the bridge, working away. And it was 2.5 years from initial idea to completion on this piece. And the Bay Bridge, this section of it is 1.8 miles long and 525 feet tall. So it's quite a enormous structure. And the idea was fairly simple idea was to add 25,000 white LED lights to the suspender cables of the bridge to kind of enliven and activate it. And the Bay Bridge has always been sort of overshadowed by the Golden Gate. So this was a chance to kind of change the way people see the bridge. And it was really transformative. And there have been many bridges that have been illuminated, thousands, of them. But something special happened here. And I think it's because of the care which we took in creating the sequencing, which was all inspired by the site. So I spent months and working on the piece night after night, adjusting and tweaking the patterns and sequences of light to be just the right tempo. And I thought of it almost like I was tuning a musical instrument. And it was just remarkable to see the response that the public had. The piece was supposed to be up for 2 years. And at the end of those 2 years, there was kind of an uproar when it came down, and people wanted it back. It had become part of their lives. And it was interesting how this subtle gesture could become so meaningful to people and to bring something to life. But I think it has to do with the Bay Area and its interest in technology, infrastructure, light, and all of that coming together in such a way. But I think it's also the abstract nature of the piece, which was important, that it wasn't displaying images or text. So it was highly subjective what people were seeing and responding to. But it felt like people could gather around it. And I've described the piece often as a digital campfire that kind of draws people together. And even people that don't know each other kind of see these things and want to connect and talk. And so it's it's exciting to see these works kind of create community. So I was thrilled to participate in the Illuminated River competition. So I was selected to think about the activating the Thames and its bridges. So we've been through a very long process in working on this and creating, started out with creating many simulations, which you can see here. And this actually shows the 9 bridges that we're working on, from London Bridge, Cannon Street, Southwark, Millennium, then Blackfriars, Waterloo, the Golden Jubilee footbridges, Westminster, and then Lambeth. So this is with the city and all the lights activated, but I'll show you what that looks like just sort of on its own. So you can get a sense of what we're trying to do. And our approach has been to really listen closely. I'm coming to London as an outsider, and I want to really be respectful of the sites and of all the history of the bridges. So for me, it's been about learning and responding. So studying the traditional ways that the bridges have been illuminated has been one interesting approach. Another has been to see how the bridges have been illuminated during special events like the Olympics, for instance. So understanding from those points and then extending that language. So it's working with the structures and adding light to them, but doing it in such a way that it really is unique to each bridge. With Millennium Bridge, for instance, we're using a band of white light. And in that case, we had a chance to work closely with Andy Bow from Foster's and Partners, the original project architect, who was able to describe to us Sir Norman Foster's thoughts about the bridge and what the original intentions were, that it would be a blade of light over the river, inspired by Flash Gordon. So I love this pop cultural reference, but in the final product, when the resulting illumination was not what they had intended from the start. So we were able to work closely with them and to tweak the light and make it, what it should be. So it was very exciting to be able to kind of go back and adjust and tweak and fix these things that needed to be kind of adjusted. So other bridges, like the London Bridge, had this raking light coming down the side, this kind of orangish red light. Many of the lights were not functioning. So we were able to replace those lights with full color RGB lights to activate that surface. And again, in keeping with the way it was illuminated previously. Cannon Street Rail Bridge had a similar treatment. That bridge, a lot of people don't even know what Cannon Street Rail Bridge is. It's disappeared completely. But through the addition of this band of light, it really has activated that bridge and created a sense of space, particularly in relationship with London Bridge. So the two bridges are almost in dialogue as they communicate. With Southwark Bridge, that's a more traditional cast iron bridge. In that case, we worked on activating all the understructure of the bridge and to kind of show all the engineering and I learned a tremendous amount from working on that bridge. Initially, I thought, I noted the teal color and the gold, but over time, I started to really understand the palette and to be able to work with that. So I'll show you a little preview of what's happening in the studio. Here we are working on London Bridge, and we have a very large LED array that we're using to preview the work. And we've done a lot of work with simulation. So we had all of the bridges scanned and 3D models created, and then we put them into Unreal Engine, a video game engine, to see them in real time. So we have the water that's reflecting in real time, and then we have the custom software that we've created, and that's what we're using here in the foreground to create the light patterns. So it's a bit like Mission Control. Each bridge had its own computer, and we were able to see these things. And the other part I should mention is that there's a sense of synchronization between the bridges. So it's not just about one bridge. There are these moments in which they start to synchronize. So they kind of come in and out of phase, which is quite exciting to see those moments. So we had to kind of visualize these things. And now, with the pandemic, we've had to push this even further. And we're trying to set up, actually right this moment, a live feed from London where I can see with a very, very talented videographer and cameras, see what I'm doing in London, and that would be sent back here. So I'm, again, pushing forward with the technology and these ideas of telepresence to try and activate and see what we can do under these very particular circumstances. So it's really been quite an adventure, and we're thrilled with the first 4 bridges and very excited to present the next 5 shortly in the coming weeks. and to do something really special for London, especially at this time, which is so challenging. And hopefully that will help people to feel a sense of connection and bring some light to this moment.
I think Joanna may have frozen, but that was fantastic. You're not. Okay.
Sorry, Sarah. Thank you so much, Leo, and I'm sorry for the slightly strange interaction with me. In some sort of weird sense of poetry, I just had a power cut just as you started talking. Everything went off, including my internet connection, and I had to go on my telephone Wi-Fi. But it seems I'm now up and running again, so I really apologize for that. And thank you, Sarah, for holding fort. I really enjoyed you speaking of the digital campfire, but also really how you can rediscover a city such as London that I live in through light. So thank you for that. I will hand over to Teemu now to talk a little bit more about your work. So welcome, Teemu, to the virtual presentation floor. You feeling ready?
Yes, thank you. Let me just share my screen. Let's see, where do we have it?
And while we wait for Teemu to share screen, I just want to say we welcome all questions you have. Pop them in the chat and we come to them after the conversation. And we will, as Sarah said, answer as many questions as we can. But Teemu, I hand over to you.
Just a sec. Can you see my slides or can you see presenter notes?
We can see presenter notes, actually.
Oh, that's kind of strange. Another glitch, maybe?
I quite like this evening's event. It's like we've had every single type of Zoom glitch that we can have, from not being able to share screens, to sharing the wrong screens, to not having any power at all. But we will get there.
Hopefully. Hope so. Just a sec.
Yeah.
Oh, there's something now kind of funky. This worked just a second ago, but...
Well, while you're sorting that out, I just wanted to say that if you want to see Illuminated River, the first 4 bridges, and you aren't able to come down, we work with Google Arts and Culture. So there is a virtual exhibition of the phase 1 4 bridges. So you can get a real sense of what it would be like to be on a boat and under the artworks that Leo has created. I think the chat room is trying to help you solve your tech problem, which is really rather sweet.
Top right corner, you can toggle the screen selection. I sort of feel that Teemu might have a good sense of how to use his computer, but maybe Keynote is not it for you.
So what do you see now?
A white screen.
A white screen.
Yeah.
Kind of exciting. Oh, okay. Now
we can see your desktop.
Ooh.
Sierra, I think.
And still not seeing.
Now we can. Now it works perfectly. We're there. Okay. Thank you, Teemu.
Excellent. That's one hurdle done. So hello, my name is Teemu Määttänen, and I'm a media artist from Helsinki, Finland. Just kind of to start off, I was kind of floored by Leo's presentation, which was really kind of wow, excellent, really exciting. And we do kind of share some ideas that probably pop up in my presentation as well. So my background is in theater. So I've been educated as a lighting designer, but been working mostly with installations and video art since I graduated. I worked with this research program called Tutkivan teatterityön keskus in Tampere University for quite a while, researching the use of video in theater. So I've had this kind of academic background as well on this. And now I'm working in Aalto University as the lecturer in digital design methods. So this Zoom thing is actually kind of familiar to me, but still having technical issues is kind of, even to a seasoned pro like me, is kind of happening all the time. So I have a website. There's probably going to be links at some point about my work. So I'm going to present some of my work. But as we saw with Leo's, at least for me, the videos kind of get choppy. So looking at them on the website might be kind of beneficial. Yeah, I have a Vimeo site as well for the links and an Instagram page. I work mainly with processing, and then I work with Blender, so both open source programs, free to use. Processing is an awesome Java-based programming language, and Blender is a 3D modeling software. So the first project I'm going to show is called Noisescape from 2014. It was done for Lux Helsinki festival here in Helsinki, and then it traveled to and was done again for Signal festival in Prague. Kind of the same idea with Leo as with Leo, kind of staring at the digital fire. And I was also inspired by anime and kind of woodblock drawings and Hayao Miyazaki's films and anime films in kind of larger contents. And I created this long piece that has this undulating shapes, and then there's video projection mapped onto that. And this was done with processing, coding, and then rendered out as a video loop and then played in the festival. The next one I'm going to present is Atlas Tree. This was done not last year, but the year before, 2019, for the Espoo Visual Festival here in Helsinki. So completely done in code, again with processing, mapping kind of lines and different kinds of mapping symbols or map symbols into this very old tree at the Traskenda area. They have this really old, beautiful park, and we had this beautiful tree that a lightning had hit some 50-60 years ago, and one of the tree trunks or tree branches was broken, and I did a mapping on that tree trunk or branch. And then project that also has music. I'm just gonna do a little bit less music. So an interactive piece with 3 interactive instruments that can be played, and this is a concert/installation, so I will show the installation as well. And this is from the concert version, so we have 3 interactive instruments and a guitar, and a composition made with these visual and audio-visual instruments that can be played with your hands, and then there's also synced with the guitar playing. And this is from the Suomenlinna Festival or Biennale for Light Art called Flash Biennale. So there is a installation version for this, so people can also use these on their own. So we have kind of these interactive instruments, and you can go and play them with your hands, as you can see in the video in the upright corner. And you get these really beautiful light shapes and this music that you can produce with your hands. And play with your friends. Yeah, so there's 3 instruments, so they can be played at the same time, and you can play with your friends with this. And there's a demo video of me just testing out the interaction. And then there's this. We've also done a LED screen version of the same thing. So for a bigger LED screen without those folded structure or folded paper instruments, but on a LED screen. The idea is kind of the same here as well. And then going to the piece that I actually have exhibited in London at the Southbank. So the Noste piece, it was done first in 2008, and now again in 2020. So the first version, you can see here on the left, was kind of a smaller version. So it was kind of 5 meters maybe wide. And now the kind of biggest challenge was kind of figuring out how to do it in a bigger scale. These are some of the sketches for the first version. So my idea was here kind of the same, that kind of building, or actually kind of putting some virtual lights inside of objects and seeing that what kind of an effect would be, what could I produce with projections? Or could I make that illusion of lights being inside of the objects? And I also tested out kind of where to put the lights and tried to figure out these sequences or images that kind of involve virtual lights somehow inside the objects or outside of the objects. So the second version was indeed the biggest thing, was kind of figuring out how to do that 5 meters into 20 meters, just scaling it up. So I have some images here, kind of just figuring out the first version, where to put things. So kind of this iterative process with the people that I was working with. So this was done completely like this in Zoom. So with people who were kind of helping me build this. I haven't been to London at all, but presenting these to other people and then talking about, can we actually make this? So this version was discarded because of the trouble to build it, but then we kind of shifted it around. So from the ceiling to the floor, easier to build. And then we ended up with these columns on the balcony, and then some research work for the animations and the lights. So kind of researching the material, the virtual material there, what could it be, how would the light be inside of it. And then there's some video materials of or scenes that I built, or sequences that I built into the loop. So it's again a video loop, and this was made in Blender, and it's about 10 minutes long, and there's some images of the sequences and a couple of videos from the video files. And then I haven't seen it, so I hope that it looks good. So these are actually the images that I've received and got from London. And I do hope that it looks like something like that there in real life as well. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teemu. That was really interesting to see, and to also see it juxtaposed with your work, Leo. I thought maybe to start off the conversation, we can maybe go back to the title of the evening's talk, which is obviously Bringing Light Art to London. And I think it's particularly telling that both your projects that we're speaking about based in London allow for more casual engagement in a way with the artworks. Some people might not even see them as artworks and might not recognize them as artworks, but they still have an emotional or immediate reaction to them as they walk past them. And I guess I wonder for both of you, what is that interest that you have with this more serendipitous engagement with your work that comes through the very medium that you work in? And maybe, Leo, you could start by speaking to that.
Sure. I love, the chance encounter. It's really, my process involves a lot of chance already in creating the sequences. So I'm making discoveries, and being able to integrate those discoveries into the urban fabric is incredibly exciting. And And if people know about art or programming, you know, great, those layers are there for them, but they don't, it's not required at all. And light is such a kind of a seductive material that we're all drawn to as humans, that we can't help but be attracted to it. And I think then when you add the addition of sequencing that's encoded and there's information, we can't help but want to recognize pattern, which we're hard coded to do, and to start to create some sort of meaning from it. So I'm interested in that line of recognition, but because it's abstract, you're not quite able to recognize it and resolve it. And you don't, it's not like reading a word or seeing an image and you say, okay, I know what it is and I can move on. But that kind of mysterious, slippery nature is what is appealing to me. And just, you know, I love kind of overhearing people's experiences when they're seeing the pieces on the Thames. And it does blur that line between sort of architectural lighting, but then there's something else going on, which I think is quite different through the sequencing. But I think it certainly is exciting to see people respond to it for me when I'm there in London.
And how do you see people respond to it? What are their reactions? Is it through filming it, snapping out their cameras, or is it something much more kind of personal to them? Is that something that you can perceive?
I mean, it depends. I mean, some people, you know, it's very sort of intimate and personal and quiet and meditative and operating on the space of, you know, a lot of my interest is in the rhythms of the body, of the breath, you know, the inhale and exhale, or the heartbeat, or things that we know. And those things are suddenly reflected in the urban landscape. And it's very different. And sometimes you can't even tell that the lights are moving. So it's just at this kind of liminal point of perception, which I think is very interesting. So I think it's hard to know, but I think just in seeing people kind of stop and seeing their faces, and you're not quite sure what they're experiencing, but it's, you know, in the kind of grayness of sometimes in London and in the weather and the winter and all these sorts of things, these things really are, you know, sort of activate the spaces around them. And I think it really changed them in a way that I'm very happy to see people's responses and hear their thoughts. But we've had very positive feedback so far.
Teemu, how is your approach to that serendipity in the work, and how it allows for people to engage with it in an open way that you can't really control?
It's a good question. I was thinking that I think that at least my kind of aesthetic choices are using kind of the same kinds of or the same kind of aesthetic language as commercials do, so that we have this kind of lighting or effects or LED lights, or kind of, we have those in the cities already with commercials and used as a commercial vehicle. But I think that it's really nice to kind of bring in this more meditative way of using those technologies and kind of harnessing that power to kind of make you think about something else than you know, buying new stuff, which is really nice. And I hope that these kind of pieces kind of evoke that in people, that they kind of stop for a minute and just watch something beautiful happening, or some kind of a sequence that kind of just, oh, that's nice, and it doesn't really kind of guide my life to a certain direction, but more like give me a pause in my life and just way to breathe.
Reclaiming the light in a way.
Exactly, and space.
Yeah, and space.
Yeah.
To go back to you, Leo, and the Illuminated River project, I mean, I think what really strikes me with that is that the project as such, and I think you might have mentioned this earlier as well, or Sarah did, that it's the first really cohesive lighting vision for the bridges traversing the Thames in central London. And as such is celebrating the structures as architectural, social and historical landmarks. But when getting the commission, did it surprise you somewhat that this more coherent approach to the lighting of such important infrastructures in the centre of London by the River Thames hadn't been undertaken before?
Well, you know, some bridges were illuminated, some weren't, some had been in the past, but the lighting had, stopped working, and there were things left over from the Olympics. So there was a little bit of an assortment of attempts at things. And it was exciting to be able to think of it in a more comprehensive way. And how could we unify it through a very careful study of the bridges? And, it's been, we've been working with Alex Leifschitz and LDS Architects in London and Atelier 10, who have been just amazing partners in understanding the structures and all the ways that we need to realize these things. But I think it's a very thoughtful approach, and it's been done in a way that is made to stand the test of time with the highest quality equipment, incredibly well conceived and built for the long haul, which I think is important because a lot of these illumination projects last a very short amount of time, or they're just it's a very challenging environment on the river with the moisture and the vibrations and all the things that happen. So that's that's been quite challenging, but slowly we're starting to see the way that these fairly simple interventions can really have a profound effect in altering the space and kind of elevate what's there, because there's so much beauty and so much history around the Thames. So I've been kind of overwhelmed by the history and all the layering of what's happening. So I've been sort of trying to channel that in the work. And I think that, when people can finally see the 9 bridges together, it's really going to kind of alter their experience of the city. And what's nice is that you can take this journey along by walking the river, which is really wonderful at night, and to kind of see these things unfold one after the other, or to experience it on a boat. There's so many different ways of seeing it in sequence. So you're kind of seeing this, one thing and then another and another. And there are these parallels between certain bridges that I think will become apparent, and certain things relate to one another. But it's in a way, as Teemu was saying, these kind of visual instruments, and each bridge is an instrument, and they're all working together to create this overall effect. But it's interesting, it uses light and it doesn't use sound at all. So it's really just kind of visual music.
It's interesting because it strikes me that listening to the sound of the videos that you shared with us, Teemu, there seems to almost be a music also in your work, Leo, but as you say, it's not something you hear, but it's something that you perceive within yourself when you look at it. But what to you is the most dramatic difference? And not to place words in your mouth, but I think that for me, what's really inspiring and quite kind of awe-making or surprising with it is the subtlety of it. It's the fact that you look at it, but you are not necessarily sure that there is something really clearly different there. It is really using the existing infrastructure and working with it in such a way that is very sensitive to the original architecture. And it feels to me like maybe it should always have been there. But what to you is the most dramatic difference in achieving this?
Well, just as you said, if you go there and you see something that feels different slightly, but you can't quite put your finger on it, I think that will have been a success, because it's not about me coming with the ego of the artist and using the bridge as like a pedestal and putting my work on it. That's not what it's about at all. It's really working with the elements that are there and mirroring the surroundings, and even through the sequencing, all the motion is inspired by the movement of the river and the Thames that rises and falls 5 meters twice a day, and the traffic, the pedestrians, the boats, all these different things all this movement is suddenly being reflected in the light. So that is sort of in a way a reflection or a mirror of the space. So I think there is a lot of subtlety to it, and I love that part of it. But then there are these moments of connection of like, there's we see something in the water that is reflected on the bridge, or a bus goes by over the top, and a blob of light goes along with it. So there are those interconnections, which are, it's not as tightly coupled it's not interactive, literally, like this happened and then this happened. But through the authoring process, there is this connection between the two, which I think people will feel as they spend time with it.
And Teemu, in a similar way, the Winter Light exhibition is really celebrating how the medium of light can transform our physical spaces. And I think that's one of the kind of criteria of the show, looking at how light influences the spaces we all share. But also how it affects our emotions and how we feel when standing in front of them. So although you haven't been able to experience the installation firsthand, as you mentioned, how do you hope that the installation Noste will affect visitors to the Southbank? What is your hope for what they will take away with them?
I hope that they have time to kind of stop and see those sequences evolve and change, and kind of that it gives them a warm feeling when watching it, and I hope that the kind of the scale of the installation, which is kind of large on the building, even though the building is really big, that you can kind of see it from different angles and kind of see maybe different views into it, and see it from a different viewpoint might kind of also add something.
What was it like for you revisiting that work? You said 2008 was when you first conceived of it, and now 12 years later you're doing it again, but at a very different scale, as you explained. How did that feel? Because within your artistic practice, you presumably have also moved on quite a lot within that time.
Sure. I don't know if I should be worried, but kind of it felt kind of nice to go back, and of course kind of skills have evolved and your ideas have maybe evolved, but I still think that the original idea was kind of nice of kind of figuring out how to use that virtual light thing and kind of going inside of objects kind of still feels a really kind of interesting angle to me, and maybe even to explore even more to kind of see how that surface of those projections could be pushed inwards as well as outwards.
And you both touched on this in your presentations, but both of the projects to some degree that you are showing here in London, temporarily for you, Teemu, and more permanently for you, Leo, is that it's been put together during a moment of the pandemic where we have all been altering our lives and patterns. I guess just the very reason we're sitting here on a Friday night on Zoom, I guess, is a result of that. But how do you feel that it's affected your work and your working processes specifically at this point in time, and how has it made you think differently? I mean, Teemu, you in a way instructed people at the Southbank to build and create the work for you, of course with close instruction from you and constant contact, but still you had a distance from the work. And Leo, you speaking of setting up this mega lens so that you can have a kind of live feed of realizing the next stage of the Bridges project. And how has this made you think differently about how and where you can execute your installations moving forward? Leo, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. I mean, it's been we were on quite a trajectory before the pandemic hit. I just moved to a new studio, and we had all these plans to come to London. I think I was going to come at least 3 times, and everything kind of just came to a halt. But I feel fortunate that we were able to keep the studio open and keep our team in place. Many of my artist friends had to close their studios and let everybody go, and so I feel really grateful for that, and grateful for the foundation and our team in London who has been able to foster and keep things going in order to install all of this. It's very challenging installing the equipment on the bridges, and it requires abseilers who are hanging in harnesses in the middle of the night with a heavy thing and try not to fall into the Thames, and which can be deadly. I mean, the undercurrents and tows and all these things. There's a lot of complexity to that, and I guess working with the team there has been amazing, and doing it over Zoom and doing exactly what you were saying, Teemu. We were testing lights and having some challenges and pointing them and trying to take photographs and videos and capturing what we're seeing, but what the work that we do is all about opticality of it and perception and the eye, which is very subtle. So it's hard to capture these things with cameras. But we've been able to do it and work closely together with Zoom and make the best of the tools, and it's pushed us in this new direction. But I think it's, even though I can't go to London physically now, I'm incredibly excited to work remotely with the bridges. And it's almost like these ideas of telepresence and how can you be more places. And honestly, I was traveling so much, and I don't think it's not good for the planet. It's not good for me. Certainly some travel is good, but getting on a plane several times a week is, that it feels very strange. And, not having been on a plane for a year is an interesting lesson. So, I think there's been some positive things about what's happened, and you really think, do I really need to do that? And how much can I do? And feeling the sense of connection like we're doing now, it's become, I feel very much like I'm with you all now and we're together. And so I think that's a benefit, and we're getting through it. There's no replacement for seeing it with my own eyes, and I can't wait to actually get to London and really do the final touches on the piece. But I think it's very important at this moment in time to push this forward and to do what we can with the technology that we have. And artists are innovators, and that's what we do. So we love challenges, and I think we're getting through that.
Mm. Teemu, how has this process and period been for you in regards to working during COVID?
Well, I was just marveling at Leo's kind of visualization with Unreal and kind of that really nice simulation stuff, which all obviously kind of takes a lot of work, and you have people to do that and kind of resources. I'm kind of a one-man band in a sense, so I'm working on my own, so I'm kind of limited. So in my kind of resources, but definitely this has pushed more kind of pressure and more work on me, and I think other artists as well. If you are working remotely, so you have to kind of figure out new ways to present your ideas and kind of simulate more precisely, and thankfully there are tools like Unreal around right now, and it's developing like lightning fast. So it's really fun that we have these tools, and it's a good in a sense it's a good point for us to have this. We have Zoom, for example, which is awesome. We can talk like this. So there are tools to kind of overcome this. We don't have to send letters anymore, for example, which would be a pain, more of a pain.
I found you appreciate letters in a different way nowadays, though.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think this has definitely kind of pushed, and it keeps on pushing, because this is continuing. We're still not out of it, definitely not, and this will be going on. So I think this will be a kind of a shift with everybody, but definitely with artists. So kind of especially developing those skills that how do you communicate your ideas and visualize and simulate stuff for everybody to understand.
I guess for me it's interesting because I think that the work that you're presenting and showing us here is really at the same time so perfectly fitted to this moment. The calm and tranquility that these works have, and looking at the rhythm of the lights and the fact that they are in the open air is something that really takes on even a greater significance at this moment, where Londoners and people all over the world are experiencing their cities and their public spaces in a way that they never have before. So I think that that's something that in this particular moment is of great value. I work for a museum where our public can't come into the museum because, well, we're not open, but the engaging with an audience through open air artworks is clearly somewhere that we can feel much more safer, both as makers and viewers. So has that moment and that opportunity of this moment brought something new to your thinking and how and where and what you can present, Leo?
Yeah, it's I've always been interested in the way that this light work can get to these kind of fundamental things that we have as humans in our response to light, because it's not about words and it's not about images. It's something lower level that we're all connected to, and that kind of primal element I think is very interesting. And I'm interested in the like when people are looking at a sunset or looking at the movement of rippling water, and we love these things and we respond to them, and I'm always interested in why we respond to those things. So that's what I work towards in my programs and my coding. I see the movement of water, and I ask my programmer, how do we do that? How can we translate that into code? And so I'm always trying to distill those moments and elicit those same kinds of responses that we have to things in nature. So if we can create a sense of awe or wonder or something beyond just, because at the end of the day, I'm using LEDs and software. It's code, and it's very cold, but somehow something very different comes out of that, and sort of there's a richness to it. And I think that is, at this particular moment, it is really necessary. I mean, even before this, I felt there was a great sense of polarization, and sort of, different, a lot of tension, and not to be, cliched about the bridges, but those connection points are important, and focusing on those connections, and they take on new meaning. And throughout the Illuminated River project, we've had different events happen, like the terrorist attack that happened on London Bridge happened just a week before we were doing some light tests, and these things become very meaningful and relevant. And we've actually illuminated the bridges in blue to honor all the medical workers in the UK in their color, as sort of a tribute. So I think that these things are helpful in marking these moments beyond the artwork itself, but they are these focal points and things that can exist out in the world. And I think we need more art in the world. Museums and galleries are amazing and we love them, but dragging these digital things out so people can see them, and I don't necessarily like the baggage of the computers and the wires and all those things, and that's not important to me. It's just the experience and the effect of being with these works is what's really important. And I see Teemu in the same way of activating a tree and kind of mixing nature and code and finding those connections between these two worlds, and using software in a much more fluid way that sort of is, you're sort of improvising with what's part of the natural world, and what we respond to, I think is very exciting. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
Mm. Teemu, do you have any reflections on that?
Well, I was thinking about kind of these, because these light festivals tend to be festivals that attract a lot of people at the same time. So, which is something that we can't do right now. So as a kind of a counter idea, maybe going like more intimate, I don't know, or like in Leo's case, kind of going long term. So you have kind of an even distribution of people coming and seeing big pieces. But also I thought that it was really kind of a nice idea of Leo's, and a throwback here, that about the woods and kind of going into nature and out of these kind of cityscapes, and maybe doing pieces there. So light festivals tend to be centered in these kind of downtown areas, so kind of where there's most people, there's light pieces or light festivals. So kind of maybe seeing some light festivals way in the
forest.
In the forest, wouldn't that be like really awesome? Like taking a day hike and finally arriving in a place that has light art in it. So wow, that might be really cool.
There's a lot of forest in Finland, so
there is.
Yeah.
Yes.
You'd be pleased to hear that as you've been talking, there's been a lot of questions coming through the chat, and I thought that maybe for the final moments of this talk, and to everyone who's joined us, we will run over a little bit because of the tech gremlins in the beginning and so on, and we'll try and get through some of the questions that we have for you. They range from very technical questions to more general questions. I think I'll start with one that comes to both of you, from Hesham. With these projects being considered for the long haul, as you said, Leo, and as you now touched upon, Teemu, do you ever worry that the technology used for this at one point becomes dated? Or do you think that there may be better technologies in the future that create more enhanced experiences?
Well, I think we're trying to use the most robust technology that we can. And even though that's advancing, I think some of the sequences are very, they're very simple and kind of primal. And even if you get a computer that's 10 times as fast, that's not going to make any difference to the sequencing. So I think that, my intention is to create things that are sort of timeless and connected to things that are, it's not really about, it is not going to feel like it needs to be upgraded or, and because of its sort of simplicity, I think it will stand the test of time. But we are always concerned about how to keep that going into the future and how to make it robust. And we do a lot of behind the scenes debugging and stuff that probably no one cares about. But we, for our work to exist, we have to think about these things and create archives and think ahead, because I want my work to be available in 100 years or 200 years. And the only way that's going to happen is by us all writing down as much as we can and doing backups and describing our intentions and in some way that will be readable in the future. And, and hopefully some pieces will survive, some may not, but that's just the nature of it.
And Teemu, how do you look at that?
Well, because of my background in theater, I'm kind of, I'm more of a throwaway guy. So because theater is the art of now, so it happens now, and when it's over, it's over. So I tend to have a little bit of a same maybe approach to installations, and my installations have been on these short festivals that are for a couple of weeks or maybe a month, now a couple of months in London, which is still kind of a relatively short time. So, but it's a good question. Kind of, does it age well? and I don't know. For me, it's not really that important question. I'm not worried about it. So if it does age and look like dated in a time, then we'll just make more work. That's not so dated.
Another question, which is for both of you, which is from Sean, and who's been working as a digital artist and animation artist for 10 years now, is asking, do you have advice on how to develop a practice as a light moving image artist working in the public art realm? And specifically the public, I think, is the emphasis here, rather than working for private commissions and smaller galleries.
Well, I think it takes an incredible amount of tenacity. It's one thing to do things in your studio and the things, that you can do yourself. But when you start doing these larger scale things, you need teams of people, and it gets very complicated. And it takes years and years and years to do these things. So not every artist is kind of cut out for that kind of thing. And for me, the reward is tremendous at the end of these years when you've done all this work and finally you can make a piece that is, can impact millions of people, is very thrilling. But I would say the most important thing is to sort of get your work out there and not be shy. I think you have to get good at talking about your work, making websites, and some artists have an aversion to this, and maybe they're not great at it. But I think it's something that artists are sort of literate in a certain way and maybe not in others, but we have to push ourselves to do these things that may be a little bit uncomfortable, but that do open up doors. And it's a lot about connecting, presenting, and getting the work out there. So I think that's an important part for every artist.
Really good input. And Teemu, do you have any tips?
I think that was perfectly put.
Great. There's some specific questions for you, Leo, and this is one from Nicola. She's interested in your transition from sculpture to digital work. Did you learn to code yourself, or are you working with programmers? And could you talk a little bit more about how you bridge the art and computer science worlds in terms of communication and personality types, which is an interesting observation?
Yeah, I studied as an undergraduate at Yale in sculpture and finished there in about 1990. And that's when things like Photoshop and virtual reality started to get interesting. And that drew me to NYU, to the Interactive Telecommunications program, which was a graduate program. So at that point, there was no industry and you really couldn't get a job at all, maybe making CD-ROMs or something, but there was not like it is today. And these things were very expensive and hard to get access to. So I went to NYU so I could get on the $1 million supercomputer that would do 3D graphics. And through those experiences, I learned a tremendous amount. So yes, I started video editing, I started programming, very simple, things with microcontrollers and connecting this thing to that thing. And so it got me started. And then I spent some time at a research lab in Palo Alto, and it was a long path to finally discovering light sculpture. But I pretty quickly exceeded what I could do myself as a programmer and found programmers that I could work with. And it does require a certain personality type to be able to communicate with an artist. So I've been very fortunate to work with extremely talented groups of people and continue that to this day. And the tools that I use are bespoke tools made to do the sequences that I then use myself. So it's very much about me, and it's being developed for this one, particular use. But that's being able to communicate, these kind of creative ideas to technical people is one of the challenges, but something quite exciting. And I feel like now I have my own little research lab, and it's great to be able to brainstorm and think and do, and but I think it's also, it's possible to, with the internet and all the tools we have now, to share a lot of knowledge and for artists to help one another. So even though you may be out and you don't have a giant team, I don't think that really matters these days, because you can learn so much and people are really generous. And I think that's important for artists to be generous and to help one another through these things. And that's part of the spirit of Burning Man and in this kind of DIY culture is in these maker spaces. And, I think we're in this kind of golden age of having access to incredible tools and wonderful people who are using them in unique ways. And it's just exciting what's happening out in the world. So I think we'll see over the next few years the fruits of all of that.
Mm. There's been a few questions actually around what software you use and the more technical aspects of your work, but I think that you actually have answered that quite well there in terms of the research lab that you have and how you developed your own softwares and programs in studios. I think we might leave that for you who are interested in finding out more. Leo, is there anywhere they can go to hear you speak about that in more detail?
There's many talks on my website at Villareal.net that detail some of those things at the Maker Faire and different places to get more technical. Yeah.
Great. So we will direct our audience to that for those particular answers. There is here one from Ian to both panelists, to both Teemu and Ian. The language of lighting has come so far in a short space of time. How can we go about embedding that further in the public's consciousness so they see lighting as something beyond the simple and the functional, or the simply functional even?
Mm-hmm.
Teemu, do you want to offer a response?
That's a tough question. The language of light. I don't really have an answer to that. That's a tough question. I'm kind of thinking that, is there a language of light? I think there's kind of a language of art, and there's kind of language of shape and color, and or kind of these things that kind of make up the pieces, and all together they kind of maybe associate to something like lighting phenomenon or something like that. Mm-hmm. So for me at least, lighting isn't really kind of a narrative thing. So in that sense, it's not a language, because it's not telling you kind of straight up things. But it's true that we could kind of educate more to kind of seeing. I think that's the key, that you could kind of actually see more and observe more than just kind of your surroundings, but kind of make observations of light phenomenon, and light art pieces kind of help with that. They kind of guide you towards seeing actually these kind of strange things happening in a more focused way, and maybe you can see those same phenomenon and effects happen in real life then as well.
Leo, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, what we're doing is probably very specific and specialized, and we've been thinking about it for a long time. But I think these things will become more a part of the day-to-day environment. And we've been very interested in creating a good example for illumination in public spaces in London. And a lot of the fixtures we're using are very energy efficient, and we're cutting the usage tremendously from the older fixtures. We're also directing light very precisely with this new technology. So, you know, you're not spilling light into the sky, you're putting light only where you need it, which is a very new way of using light. And we like for that to happen in other parts of the city as well, because there's so much glare of light pollution and things that are not appropriate. So I think, you know, hopefully the future is all about putting light where it should exist only, and in a sensitive way, and using only the energy that we need. And I think as light, you know, with LED and change and all these things, that there could be more kinetic qualities to the light. They could be subtle and elegant, and not just about flashing lights that are kind of in Las Vegas and Times Square and that sort of thing. So I think we're the kind of beginnings of this. And when we were first conceiving of the Illuminated River project, we thought of, you know, it as a giant ecosystem of light, and not just the bridges, but all the surrounding banks and all of it, that other artists could participate in and create different pieces. And you know, between what I'm doing and what Teemu's doing, it's like we're starting like planting a garden in a way. And these are these kind of little organisms that are kind of talking, and hopefully more of those kinds of things will grow to where you do have this very beautiful environment that is alive and kind of synthesizing, you know, the urban environment with the natural environment, and something that is, you know, so maybe this is the beginning of something like that. And, you know, I hope that will continue.
We will have to wrap it up there. We've had many questions, but we will finish with one like slightly pragmatic one, but maybe also one that will kind of all set us off to some new horizons for the future. It's from Sarah, and they're asking to both of you, what are the top 3 books or resources that you would recommend for any new interactive light artist? And maybe rather than 3, I'd like to alter that to say, what would be your top recommendation for anyone who wants to explore light art in more depth, either to appreciate or to practice? Leo?
You know, I find inspiration all sorts of places, and it's not all about, even though I'm using very new technology, I'm really interested in art history and in looking at things that are very old, which I think is interesting, and how light is used and represented, and ways of connecting to those older ideas, because I think technology can be so seductive, and you get kind of taken on this thing, which at the end there's like nothing there. It can be, you know, it's in that world that Teemu was talking about earlier about advertising and buy this and buy that. And I think both of our pieces are taking a step away from that, and connecting to these older ideas. So I find a lot of inspiration in, you know, in art history. And, you know, there are lots of resources, I think, for artists out there, which are great. But I think, as you know, I'm an artist, not a technologist. So what really feeds me are other artists and other artists' work, and really trying to understand that.
Yeah.
Teemu, do you have anything to add there?
I was looking at my bookshelf there, and I don't either have kind of a good book thing to add, but yeah, I think Leo put it really nicely, that you kind of I think the question is more that find your kind of interest. What kind of an angle do you have to light, or to art, or to design, or whatever it is, and then just kind of explore and expand on that. So that's the way to kind of find your way to anything, but definitely kind of interactive technologies and things are heavy to learn. So you do need to kind of find some resources to learn those from. And Leo had some really nice references to all kinds of open source ideas and stuff like that, which is a good place to start.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. It's been a welcome distraction this Friday night to hear both of you speak about your work so candidly and so evocatively, and bringing focus to an art form that is so vital to how we experience the city and space and place. As we draw this event to a close, I don't know if the organizers wish to share a slide with all the key details that our audience can visit in terms of websites and opening dates and so on, but I'll read out some information to you so that you have the possibility of engaging with these works also after this talk. So as we draw the event to a close, I want to make sure that our London-based audience make full use of the opportunity to explore these artworks in more depth as lockdowns hopefully are easing in the near future. Winterlight, as Sarah said, is continuing until the 28th of March at the Southbank Centre. And this spring, the second part of the Illuminated River project will bring Leo Villareal's work to Blackfriars, Waterloo, Golden, Jubilee, Westminster and Lambeth Bridge, as we said earlier. And it will make it accessible to an even larger London-based population. Please make sure that you try and go out there and experience this safely once it's unveiled. I look forward to doing so myself, as I will be moving close to Lambeth Bridge. I'm very delighted. And with that, it really remains for me to thank you, the audience. You've been wonderful and keeping the chat alive, both with comments and questions. And Teemu, you'd be happy to hear that the forest light idea has had some good endorsement in the chat. And I'd like to thank you, Sarah, the Illuminated River Foundation and the Finnish Institute in the UK and Ireland and the Embassy of Finland in London for bringing this talk to all of us tonight. And finally, Teemu Määttänen and Leo Villareal for bringing light into our lives and such thoughtful reflections on your work this now darkening Friday night here in London. And I'd like to thank you both. It's really been a pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we wish you all a very good night.